Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight, we descend into terror with Edgar Allan Poe's chilling masterpiece, The Pit and the Pendulum. This is not a mere retelling, but a suspenseful reimagined narration in English, crafted to grip you with fresh intensity and cinematic dread.
I was consumed, ravaged to the edge of death by that endless torment. When at last they loosened my bonds and allowed me to sit, I felt my senses slipping away like sand through trembling fingers. The sentence, the terrible decree of death, was the final sound that struck my ears with clarity. Afterward, the voices of the inquisitors dissolved into a single droning murmur, a hollow vibration that reminded me of a mill wheel grinding in the distance. Soon even that faded, leaving me in a silence more dreadful than sound. Yet my eyes still clung to vision, though twisted and magnified by delirium. I saw the lips of the judges, pale against their black robes, paler than parchment, grotesquely thin, carved with unyielding cruelty. Fate itself seemed to spill from those lips, syllables shaping my name without a whisper, and I shuddered at the silence that followed. The sable draperies along the walls stirred faintly, like shadows breathing, and horror seized me. My gaze fell upon 7 tall candles burning on the table. At first they seemed like guardians, slender angels of mercy, glowing white with promise. But then nausea surged through me, violent and electric, as though I had touched a live wire. The angelic figures twisted into hollow phantoms, their heads aflame, their light mocking me with false hope. No salvation would come from them. Into my mind crept a thought, soft, seductive, like a hidden melody. The grave, with its promise of rest. The idea swelled slowly until my spirit embraced it fully. But just as I surrendered to that vision, the judges vanished, as if swallowed by air. The candles collapsed into nothingness, their flames extinguished. Darkness surged in, absolute and merciless. My senses drowned in a wild plunge, as though my soul were hurled into the abyss of Hades. Then, silence, stillness. Night became the universe. I had collapsed, but I cannot say that consciousness was entirely gone. Some fragment of awareness clung to me, faint and undefined, but not extinguished. Even in the deepest sleep, even in delirium, even in death itself, something remains. If nothing endured, then immortality would be a lie. Emerging from that abyss felt like tearing through the fragile threads of a dream. For a moment, I remembered. Then the memory dissolved, leaving only the echo of something vast and unknowable. To awaken from a swoon is to pass through 2 realms. First, the shadowed realm of spirit, then the heavy return of the body. If only we could recall the impressions of that first stage, perhaps we would glimpse the gulf beyond life, the threshold of eternity.
But those impressions do not come when summoned. They arrive unbidden, long after, like ghosts of memory. Strange visions, palaces rising from glowing embers, faces half familiar drifting in the air, perfumes of flowers that never existed, melodies that pierce the mind though never heard before. These are the whispers of that hidden stage, the shadows of the grave bleeding into waking thought. I struggled to grasp them, to drag fragments of that nothingness back into reason. At times I believed I had succeeded. Brief flashes returned, memories of towering figures carrying me downward, endlessly downward, until dizziness crushed me with the thought of infinite descent. I remembered the unnatural stillness of my own heart, a horror that froze me from within. Then came a sudden halt, as if the spectral bearers had reached the edge of infinity and paused, exhausted. After that, flatness, dampness, a suffocating weight, and then madness. Madness born of memory itself, clawing at forbidden doors, forcing me to stare into realms no mortal should recall. Suddenly, life surged back into me, motion and sound crashing against my soul. My heart thundered, its beat echoing in my ears. Then silence, blankness, and again sensation, sound, movement, a tingling current racing through my body. For a time I existed without thought, suspended in a hollow state. Then, like a blade cutting through fog, thought returned, along with terror. I struggled to grasp my condition, to understand, yet a desperate wish rose within me to sink back into oblivion. But the soul revived, and with effort I moved. Memory flooded in, the trial, the judges, the black draperies, the sentence, the sickness, the swoon. Then nothing. A void where recollection should have been. I had not yet opened my eyes. I lay on my back, unbound. My hand reached outward and struck something damp, hard, unyielding. I let it rest there, motionless, while my mind clawed at the mystery of where I was. I longed to see, yet dreaded it, not because I feared horrors, but because I feared emptiness, nothingness. At last, driven by wild desperation, I forced my eyes open. My worst fears were true. Darkness, absolute, eternal, wrapped itself around me. I gasped for breath, but the blackness pressed down, suffocating, crushing. The air was heavy, stifling, intolerably close. I lay still, forcing reason to rise above panic. I recalled the tribunal, the sentence, and tried to deduce my fate. Time had passed, long, immeasurable. Yet I did not believe myself dead. Death, as told in fiction, was inconsistent with the reality I felt. But where was I? In what state? I knew the condemned were usually executed in the flames of the auto-da-fe, and one had been held the very night of my trial. Had they returned me to a dungeon to await another sacrifice months away? No, that could not be. Victims were demanded immediately, and besides, the dungeons of Toledo had stone floors, and even there light was never fully banished. Here, there was only darkness, endless, suffocating night.
A sudden, dreadful thought struck me, flooding my heart with terror so fierce that I collapsed once more into unconsciousness. When awareness returned, I sprang to my feet, every nerve convulsing, trembling as though my body were no longer my own. My arms flailed wildly in the darkness, reaching above, around, desperate to touch something, anything. Yet there was nothing. I dared not take a step, fearing the unseen walls of a tomb might close around me. Cold sweat poured from every pore, beads of ice forming on my brow. The suspense was unbearable. At last, with cautious resolve, I moved forward, arms stretched, eyes straining, hoping for even the faintest glimmer of light. I walked many paces, but the void remained absolute. Blackness, emptiness, and with that emptiness came a strange relief. Perhaps my fate was not the most hideous imaginable. Yet as I crept onward, memories surged, whispers of Toledo's dungeons, tales too ghastly to speak aloud. Had they left me here to starve in this subterranean abyss? Or was some fate more monstrous waiting in silence? Death was certain, of that I had no doubt. But the manner of it, the hour, the cruelty, these were the questions that gnawed at me. At last my hand struck something solid, a wall, smooth, cold, slimy stone. I traced it cautiously, step by step, distrust guiding me as though ancient tales had come alive. The wall gave no clue to the size of my prison. Its uniformity mocked me, for I could circle endlessly and never know I had returned to the same place. Instinctively, I reached for the knife I had carried into the chamber of judgment. It was gone. My clothes had been stripped, replaced with a coarse serge wrapper. I had thought to mark the wall, to carve some sign into its surface, to anchor myself against the madness of endless wandering. But the blade was lost. The difficulty was small, yet in my fevered state it loomed as an insurmountable despair. I tore a strip from the hem of my robe and laid it across the floor, at a right angle to the wall. I thought it would serve as my marker, my one safeguard against endless wandering. Yet I had not reckoned with the vastness of the dungeon, nor with the weakness of my body. The ground was slick, treacherous with moisture. I staggered forward, step after step, until exhaustion claimed me. I collapsed, and sleep swallowed me whole. When I awoke, my hand brushed against unexpected objects. A coarse loaf of bread and a pitcher of water. Too weary to question their origin, I devoured them greedily. Strength returned, and I resumed my circuit. At last, after much toil, I found the rag once more. I had counted 52 paces before my fall, and 48 after. 100 in all. 2 paces to the yard meant the dungeon stretched 50 yards around. Yet its angles were many, its shape unknowable. A vault, I thought, a vault designed to mock reason itself.
There was no hope in these measurements, only a gnawing curiosity. Abandoning the wall, I dared to cross the chamber. At first I crept cautiously, for the floor was slick with slime. But courage grew, and I strode more firmly, tracing what I believed to be a straight line. 10, 12 paces, and then disaster. The torn hem of my robe tangled around my legs. I stumbled, crashing face first to the ground. At first, confusion clouded me. Then a chilling realization struck. My chin pressed against the floor, yet my lips and forehead touched nothing. A void yawned beneath me. A clammy vapor rose, damp against my skin, carrying with it the stench of rotting fungus. Horror gripped me. I lay at the edge of something unseen, something waiting to devour me in the dark. I stretched out my arm and froze. My hand hovered over emptiness. I had collapsed at the very edge of a circular pit, its depth unknowable. Trembling, I groped along the stone rim, dislodged a fragment, and let it fall. For long seconds I listened as it clattered against unseen walls, until at last a dull splash echoed from far below, followed by reverberations that seemed to rise from the abyss itself. At that instant, a sound broke overhead, the swift creak of a door opening and closing, and a faint gleam of light flickered through the gloom, vanishing as quickly as it came. The truth struck me with merciless clarity. This was the doom prepared for me. One step more, and I would have vanished forever. The death I had narrowly escaped was no myth, no idle tale whispered of the Inquisition. It was real, an execution designed not merely to kill, but to terrify. Victims were offered a choice: agony of the body or horror of the soul. I had been reserved for the latter. My nerves, frayed by endless torment, had made me the perfect subject for such cruelty.
Shaking violently, I stumbled back to the wall, vowing to perish there rather than risk the hidden wells my imagination now multiplied across the dungeon floor. In another state of mind, I might have leapt willingly into the abyss to end my misery. But now I was a coward, clinging to life, even as I dreaded it. I remembered what I had read of these pits, that death was not swift, but prolonged, designed to unravel the mind before extinguishing the body. Hours passed in restless agitation until sleep claimed me once more. When I awoke, bread and water lay beside me, as before. My thirst was unbearable, and I drained the pitcher in a single draught. Instantly, drowsiness overcame me. The water had been drugged. Darkness folded over me like a shroud, and I sank into a sleep that mimicked death. When at last my eyes opened again, I was no longer blind. A strange sulphurous glow filled the chamber, its source uncertain, but its light revealed the prison in all its dreadful extent. I had been gravely mistaken. The dungeon was far smaller than I imagined, its walls enclosing no more than 25 yards. For a time this discovery tormented me, though what did size matter under such monstrous circumstances? Yet my mind, desperate for distraction, clung to trifles. I obsessed over the error in my measurements until the truth struck me. In my first exploration, I had nearly completed the circuit before collapsing. Upon waking, I must have retraced my steps unknowingly, doubling the count. Confusion had blinded me to the simple fact that I began with the wall on my left and ended with it on my right. I had also been deceived about the shape. In darkness, every angle felt like irregularity, every niche like distortion. But now, under the sulphurous glow, I saw the prison was square. What I had thought to be stone was iron, vast plates joined together, their seams forming the depressions I had mistaken for corners. The walls were smeared with grotesque images, fiends leering in menace, skeletons twisted in mockery, horrors born of monastic superstition. Their outlines were sharp, but their colors blurred, faded by dampness, as though the dungeon itself exhaled decay. The floor was stone, and in its center gaped the pit, the same abyss that had nearly claimed me. It was the only one. But my condition had changed. I no longer wander free. I lay stretched upon a low wooden frame, bound fast by a strap that coiled around me in endless loops. Only my head and left arm remained free, just enough to reach the earthen dish placed beside me. I recoiled at the sight. The pitcher of water was gone. In its place, seasoned meat, spiced to burn the tongue, designed to stoke thirst. My tormentors had planned this well. They meant to drive me mad with thirst, to make me crave what they had stolen away. I lifted my gaze to the ceiling, 30, perhaps 40 feet above me, its panels built of the same iron as the walls. One figure seized my attention and held it fast, the image of time, painted in grim detail. Yet this time bore no scythe. Instead, he held what seemed at first a pendulum, the kind that swings inside ancient clocks. But there was something in its design, something sinister, that compelled me to stare longer. Directly above me, the pendulum stirred. At first I thought it a trick of the eye, but then the motion was undeniable. Its arc was short, its pace deliberate, slow. I watched, half in fear, half in fascination, until the monotony dulled my senses and I turned my eyes elsewhere. A sound drew me downward. From the pit to my right, rats emerged, huge, ravenous, their eyes gleaming with hunger. They swarmed across the floor, drawn by the scent of the spiced meat. I fought them back, but they came in relentless waves, a grotesque army of gnawing teeth. Time passed, minutes, perhaps an hour. When I looked upward again, horror seized me. A pendulum sweep had grown wider, its swing faster, more violent. And worse, it had descended. I saw it clearly now, a crescent of steel, gleaming with a deadly brilliance. A foot across from horn to horn, its edge sharpened to a razor's bite. Heavy, massive, tapering into a broad structure above, suspended from a rod of brass. Each swing hissed through the air, a whisper of death descending closer, closer with every breath I took. I could no longer deny the fate devised for me by the twisted ingenuity of monkish torment. My discovery of the pit had been noted by the inquisitors. The pit whispered of as the very mouth of hell, the final punishment reserved for the defiant. I had escaped its jaws by sheer accident, and so the plan shifted. Surprise was their weapon, entrapment their art. Since I had not fallen, they would not cast me in. Instead, another death awaited me. Milder, they might call it. I almost laughed at the cruelty of that word. What use to recount the endless hours of horror as I lay counting the pendulum's descent? Inch by inch, line by line, it crept downward. Time itself seemed to stretch into eternity. Days, perhaps many days, passed before its sweep came so near that I felt its acrid breath upon my skin. The stench of sharpened steel invaded my nostrils. I prayed, begged heaven for swifter mercy, for the blade to end me quickly. Madness seized me. I strained upward, desperate to meet the scimitar's swing. Then suddenly, calm. I lay smiling at the glittering death as though it were a child's toy, a rare bauble suspended above me. Another blackout claimed me. When I awoke, the pendulum had not descended further. Perhaps demons had paused its swing, mocking my weakness. I felt sick, drained, hollow, as though starvation had hollowed me out. Yet even in torment, the body craves sustenance. With agonizing effort, I stretched my left arm, the only limb left free, and seized the scraps the rats had spared me. As I forced the morsel to my lips, a flicker of something stirred. A thought of joy, of hope. But hope had no place here. It was half-formed, fragile, and it died before it could take shape. I tried to grasp it, to rebuild it, but suffering had shattered my mind. My thoughts were broken, my reason annihilated. I was reduced to ruin, an imbecile, an idiot, staring upward at the blade that promised my end.
The pendulum swung at a cruel angle, its arc set to carve across my chest, straight through the heart. At first, it would only graze the fabric of my robe, slicing threads with each pass, returning again and again. But I knew its descent would not stop there. The steel would creep lower until cloth gave way to flesh. I fixated on the thought, clinging to it as though my concentration alone could halt the blade. I imagined the sound it would make, the rasp of steel against cloth, the shiver it would send through my nerves. I dwelt on this triviality until my teeth ached, until madness gnawed at me. Down, always down.
I found a twisted fascination in its motion, wide, sweeping arcs to the left and right, shrieking like a damned soul. Yet toward my heart it crept with the stealth of a predator. I laughed, then howled as terror and delirium wrestled within me. Closer, relentlessly closer. Within 3 inches of my chest, the crescent gleamed, its hiss slicing the air. I fought against my bonds, straining my left arm, free only from elbow to hand. I could reach the platter beside me, but not the straps above. Had I broken them, I might have tried to seize the pendulum itself, but such an attempt would have been as futile as stopping an avalanche. Still, it descended. Each sweep tore a gasp from my throat. Each vibration wrung a convulsion from my body. My eyes followed its outward swing with desperate fixation, then slammed shut as it fell, though death itself would have been a mercy. Every nerve quivered at the thought that a single inch more would drive the blade into my chest. And yet, it was hope that made me tremble. Hope that clings even to the condemned. Hope that whispers in the darkest dungeons, beneath the shadow of the Inquisition. I counted the swings, 10, perhaps 12 more, and the blade would kiss my robe. With that realization came a strange calm, the sharp clarity of despair. For the first time in what felt like days, I truly thought. The strap binding me was not a tangle of cords, but a single band. One stroke of the crescent across it, and the fabric could be unwound by my left hand. But that thought chilled me. The steel would be so close, its slightest touch fatal. Surely the torturers had foreseen this. Surely they had placed the strap beyond the pendulum's path. I lifted my head, trembling, to see. The surcingle wrapped me tightly in every direction, except across the line of the descending blade. My heart surged. A fragment of an idea, half-formed before, now blazed into focus. Deliverance. Fragile, desperate, but whole. Around me the floor had long swarmed with rats, wild, ravenous, their red eyes gleaming, their teeth eager for flesh. They had feasted on the dish beside me, gnawing until only scraps remained. I had waved them off again and again, until the motion became useless, and their hunger drove them to bite my fingers. Now, with trembling resolve, I seized upon their voracity. I rubbed the remnants of the spiced meat into the strap wherever I could reach, coating it with the oily lure. Then I lay back, motionless, breath held, waiting. The rats crept closer. Their hunger would do what my strength could not. At first, the ravenous creatures recoiled. The sudden stillness unnerved them, and many fled back to the pit. But hunger is stronger than fear. Soon the boldest among them crept forward, sniffing at the strap that bound me. That single act was the signal. In swarms they poured from the well, clinging to the frame, scrambling over my body in a frenzy. The pendulum's sweep did not disturb them. They avoided its strokes with uncanny instinct, focusing instead on the bandage smeared with the lure of spiced meat. They pressed against me in suffocating waves. Their bodies writhed across my throat. Their cold mouths brushed my lips. I was nearly smothered beneath their weight. A disgust beyond words filled me, chilling my heart with clammy dread. Yet I endured, knowing freedom was near. I felt the strap loosening, fibers tearing under their relentless gnawing. In more than one place it was already severed. Within human resolve I lay motionless. At last, the surcingle fell away in ribbons. I was free. But the pendulum had descended too far. Its blade grazed my chest, slicing through robe and linen, sending a sharp agony through every nerve. Twice more it swung, each stroke biting closer. But the moment had come. With a single wave of my hand, my grotesque deliverers scattered in chaos. Slowly, cautiously, I slid from the wooden frame, sidestepping the deadly arc of the blade. For the moment, I had escaped. Free, yet still a prisoner of the Inquisition. I had barely touched the stone floor when the infernal machine halted. The pendulum rose, drawn upward by unseen hands, vanishing into the ceiling. The lesson was clear. Every movement was watched, every breath measured. My escape from one death was only a prelude to another.
My eyes darted nervously across the iron walls that imprisoned me. Something had changed, something subtle yet undeniable. For long minutes I drifted in trembling confusion, unable to grasp the alteration. Then, at last, I understood. The sulphurous glow that filled the chamber came from a narrow fissure, no wider than half an inch, running along the base of the walls. The prison was severed from the floor, as though the walls themselves floated above the stone. I bent low, straining to peer through the gap, but the effort was useless. When I rose, the truth struck me with dreadful clarity. The blurred figures painted on the walls had transformed. Their colors blazed with unnatural brilliance, their outlines sharpened into grotesque menace. Demon eyes glared at me from every direction, alive with a ghastly fire. They burned with such intensity that I could convince myself they were illusions. The air thickened. The stench of heated iron filled my lungs, choking me. The walls glowed hotter, redder, until the fiendish images seemed drenched in blood. I gasped, panting, shrinking back from the searing metal. My tormentor's design was clear, fiery annihilation. In that moment of terror, a single thought pierced my mind. The well. Its imagined coolness seemed like salvation. I staggered to its edge, peering into the abyss. The glow from the burning walls illuminated its depths, revealing horrors I could scarcely comprehend. My soul resisted, refusing to accept what my eyes beheld. But the truth forced itself upon me, searing into my reason. I cried out, a shriek torn from the core of my being. Any horror but this! I stumbled back from the brink, buried my face in my hands, and wept bitterly. The heat rose swiftly, searing the air, and I shuddered as though struck by fever. A second transformation gripped the chamber, this time in its very shape. At first, I could not comprehend it, but the truth revealed itself with dreadful clarity. The vengeance of the Inquisition, hastened by my escapes, would no longer delay its final blow. The square room shifted, two corners sharpened into cruel angles, two stretched wide and obtuse. With a low, rumbling moan, the chamber twisted into a lozenge. The walls glowed red, pressing inward, their fiery embrace promising annihilation. I almost welcomed them, whispering, "Any death but the pit." Fool that I was, had I not realized the walls were driving me toward that very abyss? Closer they came, flattening, narrowing, forcing me step by step toward the gulf. The pit yawned at the center, its mouth waiting. I shrank back, but the walls pressed me forward, relentless. At last, there was no ground left beneath me. My scorched body teetered on the brink. Despair tore from my throat in one final, piercing scream. Then
Chaos. A discordant hum of voices, trumpets blaring, a thunderous grinding that shook the prison itself. The fiery walls recoiled, rushing back, and as I fell, fainting into the abyss, a hand seized mine, strong, human, saving. It was General Lasalle. The French army had stormed Toledo. The Inquisition had fallen into the hands of its enemies.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.